we are the grey area of all companies. Like, we have to be in every single, like, marketing, partnerships, customer, every single part of the business needs to know the information that we can give. And I think that's just an amazing thing to be part of. And you are kind of I think you're kind of the glue a little bit. Like, we do get forgotten about a little bit. That's why I love that you're doing a supply chain podcast, because it's making us come to the forefront and make people realize that we are an important element of the business. But we are kind of everything needs the supply, everything needs to be able to get the goods in, and we are kind of through everything.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the video podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. In this podcast, we speak to industry leaders who share their ideas, thoughts, and anecdotes from within the logistics world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast, Chain Reaction. Again, as always, we talk about supply chain and logistics. And today, I have a guest. I have Rhys Champken, who joined us from the company Lounge, and he's a supply chain manager. And he has quite a fascinating story to tell. And I'd like to hear myself. How come, Rhys, you are a trained lawyer and then ended up in logistics? So can you tell us the story?
Yeah, of course I can. So basically, I went to uni in Liverpool, got my law degree, and I would say around about 2 years in, I was a bit like, I'm not really sure this is for me. So I've grown up with my mum, my nan, my uncle. They're all part of like logistics companies. So I kind of grew up all just kind of knowing supply chain and logistics. I think my first word was probably commodity code, to be honest. So I've just kind of grown up with it. I just knew it from day one. So I just fell into it, really. At my old place, I started in the warehouse and just kept progressing. They were like, supply is perfect for you. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take it. And then left that place, moved to Lounge just over a year ago, and never looked back since. It's definitely my game. Like, it's the perfect role for me.
So it sounds like being trained as a lawyer was like an act of teenage rebellion, so to speak,
Yeah.
and it's quite a counterintuitive one, I would say.
Yeah, but you know what? Even though I didn't go into law, I did learn a lot from doing that degree, like how you see different arguments and seeing the wider picture. It has actually helped in logistics because you kind of you kind of step back and look at everything. So you always try and find a way to get past something, or I mean, I suppose like you have to be really organized with the law as well. And the other thing is that it's a lot of recall. So you constantly have to remember things, which is exactly what I do now, because we have that many purchase orders that go out. I have to remember, right, that PO is for this thing that needs to be launched on that date. So it all intertwines in the end. So it was definitely worth it.
Right. No, I'm sure that none of that went to waste, and you're absolutely using that on a daily basis, which is actually one of the other items that we want, and one of the elements that we want to talk about is the communication things. I think lawyers, in addition to retain and recall a lot of information, is also the communications and understanding the other side, or understanding what you're dealing with, and then communicating a point of view put across. And then in supply chain communication, and we had an exchange that. The communication in supply chain is absolutely critical and absolutely pivotal. And I think you've stressed the importance of communication. So can you perhaps elaborate on the subject and maybe give us some explicit or specific experiences where it was crucial?
Yeah, well, like I did say to you before the podcast, I do think communication is the most important thing in supply chain and logistics if you want to have a good supply chain. I think that basically, if you're honest with everybody in the whole system, so internally, if you're honest with your bosses, externally, if you're honest with your forwarders and say you want it in by this date, it needs to be in by this date, then it will work in all capacity. So, for example, we Lounge is primarily a lingerie company. We are branching out we're trying to become a UK fashion house now, but essentially we have so many different launches throughout the year, whether it's lingerie, clothing, shoes, everything. So essentially what I will go to the bosses and say is, right, we've had a delay on this shipment for this big launch. we're going to have to push the launch back. I'll tell them as soon as possible. Like, I think a lot of people in this space realise that we give a lot of bad news, to be quite honest. Like, everybody forgets about all of those hundreds of shipments that got in on time. It's always that one shipment that everybody remembers that was a day late. So I'll go to our senior team and just be like, this is going to be late by 1 week. We're going to have to push launch back. However, this is in early, so let's bring this launch forward. Let's launch this now, and at least we haven't lost any customers in the meantime. But that is quite, I wouldn't say a regular occurrence anymore, but it's just as soon as you know there's an issue, or as soon as you can think of a way to fix that issue, it's just coming forward and just being honest and just saying, this is happening, let's sort it now.
It's a very interesting point. And then the communication, and actually that's one of the topics that are very often kind of pick up in conversations is the issue of trust. And what you're talking about is on the internal side, absolutely, is where you are working in sync with the other departments that are heavily or 100% dependent on you. As you said, if the product is not in the warehouse and can't be delivered, you can't sell it.
Yeah.
And it's the best way to destroy reputation and get a lot of bad reviews. However, kind of proactive communication helps out a lot. The interesting point would be to explore a couple of things, and there's definitely a lot to unpack there. One is the internal communications, as you were saying, and one of the items is the use of kind of digital tools and the toolkits and the platforms that help out with that, because everyone can use an email and WhatsApp and an Excel spreadsheet, but that is kind of archaic way of running the business, and sometimes create a lot of administrative inefficiencies as a part of the process. So things are getting lost, or it just takes too much time to process things. And then we'll talk about kind of the trust with the external suppliers a little bit later. Yeah. But let's focus on internal communication. So the use of tech. Maybe you can touch upon AI. I'm sure that you guys are using some of that as well. So how are you guys addressing this, and what do you find working or not working?
I mean, to be honest, a lot of our communication at Lounge is we use Slack, like, for everything. Like, as in, like, if you ever need a quick message, a quick question, you'll just quickly jump on Slack, just message whoever you need to let know. AI wise, I mean, we do use things obviously like Chat GPT a fair amount. I mean, it's very, very helpful, but we haven't massively gone into the realm of AI just yet. We are looking into it, but it is in the future, it will definitely be huge for our company, I can tell already. However, right now, everything that we're doing seems to be working. The supply chain and logistics side of it is absolutely fine. Things are getting in on time, good communication. So I do think in the future, AI is going to be an extremely important part of all areas of the business, to be honest. There are some areas of Slack that does use AI, and we do use that, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's massively part of communication right now. But yeah, like I said, ChatGPT is a bit of a godsend when you're launching something new and you're a bit like, I'm not sure what HS code it is. So then you'll just be like, can you help me with this? And then it'll give you some suggestions, and then you might have to tweak it, which I usually do have to, but it's always a big help, to be honest.
Right. Well, that we use Slack as well. I mean, sometimes I'm drowning in the number of channels that we have to communicate, but it's quite it's a setup that you can. It's more of within the control. So it's kind of both the recipients and the people that communicate. They all internal. So you kind of you it's much easier to set up a particular way of working, or the rules of the game. There are definitely different types of challenges when you present with external other providers or suppliers or logistics companies, warehouses. How do you find that? And more importantly, the messaging tools is one thing, but very often it's actually discrete and explicit and precise pieces of information that needed to be confirmed. Like, I have 25 SKUs on shelf ready to go, or we have received 20 pallets of X and Y. And that is precise. First of all, it's a precise level of detail. On the other hand, that information can't be afforded to be lost anywhere. So how do you deal with that side of things?
I think the communication with the external teams, like forwarders, suppliers and people like that is I think it's more the human element, as in I know I hark back to it, but the trust is just so important. So, for example, I mean, I've recently gone and looked for a new partner in our logistics teams, and we've actually settled on one at the minute who we're trying out. We do use quite a few forwarders just to balance, just to see different quotes and see what kind of price everybody's giving. But we are trying a new one at the minute, and the actual thing that did do it for me, and I thought, oh, I want to give these guys a try, is because the salesman who came in was explaining everything they're good at, but then he did show their fragility, and he said, if you ever ask me for a road shipment, then I'll tell you to go elsewhere because that just isn't our game. And as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, you're going to do for me because I just know that I can trust you. If I feel like if I ask you a question, I know you're going to give me an answer that not the answer I want, the answer, the honest answer, the realistic answer. That's the main thing for me. And another forwarder who we use, that we had an LCL which was delayed by, I think it was a week or so, and we knew it was in the port, but it still wasn't delivered up to our warehouse.
Right.
And the whole time they were constantly in contact with me saying, it's our co-loader. We're constantly trying to push them to deliver it. We don't know what's going on. But in all that time when it was delayed and I was getting, where is it from everywhere in the company, I just knew that they weren't the team to blame. I knew that I trust them, and I trust that they were actually the ones who were trying to get it in for us. So it's all about trust. I mean, suppliers are going to try and tell you what you want to hear. So it's so important to develop that relationship with them. Like when you first start with a supplier, they're going to turn around and be just trying to, like I said, like everything you want to hear, they're going to try and tell you what you want to hear. But it's when they show that fragility, it's when they show those weaknesses, that's when I really feel like I can trust you, even though they might think, oh, we're going to lose business from this. Sometimes it's either way. And that was a prime example of that logistics partner I've used. And it's because he said that they're not good at that one thing. I thought, okay, that's brilliant. I will try you with other things, the things that you say you are good at. And to be fair, they are showing that they're doing a good job at the minute. So it feels like it was the right move to make.
That demonstrates honesty, and obviously that is kind of one of the foundations of trust. Absolutely, and unfortunately, trust is one of those pain points in a lot of relationships, especially because the logistics industry, is working on the very, very thin margins. So it's very hard that they try to fight for every potential pound and penny, and then very often overpromise and way too often underdeliver. Definitely more often than we want to. We won't never, but unfortunately it does happen. But it's interesting. The points that you mentioned is actually kind of goes towards the the area of resilience, of where the supply chains and operations, the logistics operations, are flexible enough. They are resilient to various external shocks and events, and able to absorb things. And we talked about some of the proactive elements of proactive management that come into play as well. So how you guys kind of address that side of things, where it does, so that the sales environment, especially, I'm sure that in your business, the demand could be quite volatile. I wouldn't say your business is highly seasonal, but definitely, I don't know, lingeries could be highly spiky around let's call it St. Valentine's Day,
Yeah.
or whatever the gifts, I don't know, Christmas periods and so forth. So how do you guys deal with that, and what are the tech support or tech help that you are getting in that space as well?
Well, I mean, yeah, you are right. Can be quite seasonal. Thankfully, because we have that many different launches that perform so well, because I mean our product team are doing a great job. We are always doing well throughout the year, but then we do have those spikes. So prime example is Black Friday. Every year, Black Friday is obviously most people's biggest sale. So to get ahead of that, we will just make sure every month, essentially what we'll do is me and the team will sit down, we'll look at all the shipments that are ready, we'll consolidate them how we see fit, whether we want to ship sea, whether we want to ship air, whether we want to do the sea air, whether we want to do rail, everything. So, for example, we know coming up soon is some of our Black Friday shipments will be ready to go sea. So I'll try and we'll try and book everything in 2 weeks before we usually do every other month, just to make sure we get on those ships. Because right now we are seeing a lot of shipping delays, to be quite honest. I believe it's due to
Mm,
the war over in Israel and other parts like that. But we are seeing quite a lot of delays. So right now trying to build all of our shipments way ahead of time, just to make sure we are booked on those ships. There's going to be no delays. We're not going to be rolled over onto another ship, because at the end of the day, that's not actually the forwarder's fault. Like in general, they can't stop that. I know they should be striving to stop that, but it's
mm,
sometimes it's completely out of their hands. So we want to take that out of their hands and be like, right, we're the first ones on this ship. It's definitely going to get in on time. That's It's just making sure that we stop and do everything ridiculously organized. Like, it can be a bit of a nightmare to be that organized, and the suppliers. We're quite lucky actually, but some suppliers, they aren't ready that far ahead of time. But thankfully, a lot of our suppliers can
mm.
give us the volumes and the dimensions way ahead of time, so we can book it in very, very early, which means that everything should be, touch wood, should be in on time for Black Friday. Um, I mean, the other thing that we do look at is I will review the shipping times throughout the whole year. So I've already looked at last year, and so throughout like Q1, we'll have a look at how long it took us to get it from, I'm not sure, Cambodia, how long it took us to
Mm.
get it from Vietnam, so on and so forth. And we'll base it on Q1, Q2, and that's what we'll base our average shipping times on. So I'll have to go through all of our different shippers and how long it took for the various shipments, and we'll build an average into how we look at our whole supply chain and our whole, I mean, product cycle, really. So that will be given to our product team, and they'll be able to build that in. So they'll be able to say to the supplier, we need to X factory this on this date because it's going to take this long to get into the factory. But obviously, I'm not silly. I'll always build in a bit of time for a delay, because there is always going to be a delay, even if it's 1 week, 2 weeks. We'll always build a delay, but that's just on our side. We won't really tell the product team that, just because we want to just make sure that we've always built that little bit of buffer.
Mm.
But yeah, in general, the whole tech part is we will pull everything from all of our different forwarders platforms just to build in that lead time.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
Well, that's interesting because you mentioned the lead time. So by doing what you described is you having a pretty good map of what the lead times are or could be from different suppliers at different points in times, different seasons, using kind of different routes. But how do you see what could be the early indicator of things are going wrong? Because against the plan, because plans are wonderful, but they unfortunately not always
Yeah.
materializing in exactly the way that we hope. So how do you identify? How do you see that something is either about to go wrong or can be going wrong? So how, in addition to maybe creating a buffer as you discussed, like what else can you do? How else you can identify potential either bottlenecks or kind of shortcomings that you can address?
To be quite honest, I would say that is more with our, going back to it again, probably more the communication with our forwarders and the logistics teams, just because they're the ones who are closer to everything. To be honest, they were the ones who said
Mm,
to us, you're going to see some delays in the next few months because of the Israel war. You're going to see some
right.
delays because people are trying to book in on Black Friday. It's kind of trusting them. And if I feel like something is, well, in all fairness, they will come to me and they will say, just to let you know, Rhys, you are going to see some delays. You might see some increases in prices, but it's out of our hands. The shipping lines have cut. Well, you've seen a lot more cancelled bookings. It's more that they are ahead of the game for us. Like, we can get the information from news articles as much as possible, but they're the ones with the feet on the ground. They're the ones who are closest to the shipping lines, and they're the ones speaking to the actual shippers. So it's trusting them and hoping that they will be proactive and speak to us. And then if we know, then we can be like, right, guys, we need to make sure we've got this booked in now rather than a week's time, because then we're going to miss out on 3 different vessels.
Okay. No, that's very interesting. So you're using both types of kind of the macro data, the environmental data, and I'm not saying about the CO2 emissions. I'm talking about like what's happening in the market, what's happening kind of in geopolitics, and how that may affect potential kind of lanes and speeds, as well as the kind of the softer communications, just advice, insight that could be coming from your potentially suppliers as well as forwarders. So how responsive? So how do you stitch it all together? Because very often it's actually quite hard. So is that in your head, or is that a kind of some more systematic approach that you guys use for this?
Well, so we will, if we know that there's peaks, so Black Friday, we also usually do a sale around summertime. That will come all the way back from our merchandising team. So they will also build in time and they'll make sure that the POs are placed way ahead of time. So I'll go back to our shipping times. I'll give that to the merchandising team and be like, this is how long it takes to ship via sea at the minute. They'll go back to they'll work out how long the lead time is on the actual manufacturing process to place the purchase orders, and then they'll build in that time all the way from placing the purchase orders to the stock being ready to being ex-factoried, and then they'll take my lead time and be like, right, it'll take this long to get into the DC. I'll also say to them, just add a couple of weeks just to build and buffer to about 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the time of the year. So Black Friday time, there's going to be delays. Summertime, it's not usually too bad. I feel like it's a bit of an anomaly at the minute. And then we also, so we don't have to build as much buffer for it at the minute. But it's all the way from the start. It's just the whole business needs to be organised in order to make sure that everything works. And then as long as it is organised, everybody's talking, the communication is good, you will usually see an efficient supply chain.
Mm. Yeah, I think what comes to mind from what you were saying is the word collaboration. I think it's been mentioned a few times, and there are various industry terms around that, like CPFR and collaborative planning and forecasting. So it sounds like you guys do quite a lot of that kind of collaborative work. So how far does your collaboration extends both internally, because you mentioned talking to merchandising team, talking to your sales teams, as well as all the way upstream to the both the forwarders as well as perhaps suppliers? So is that a kind of an organized drumbeat in the process that you're going at, or is it more of a, is that the standardized your standard ways of working that you've employed in the business, or is that more of an ad hoc because it works and that's why you run it?
To be quite honest, I think it's a bit of both. I think when I first started at Lounge, all the teams did speak to each other. To be quite honest, the merchandising team has grown, and I think for the supply team and the merchandising team were all one. Whereas now, because the business has got bigger, it's kind of split in half. However,
Hmm.
we want to keep that communication between the two, even though we're on two separate teams. I think we always try and drum in to everybody that we might be separate teams in the business, but the business is one team. We're all striving for the exact same thing. We want to make sure we sell those thongs or bras or whatever. We want to make sure that all launches are good. So like, for example, and I do try and drum this in to the team all the time as well, is that at my last place, I was a much smaller company with a turnover a tenth of the amount of Lounge. So as with a lot of small companies, I was kind of looking after the supply, customer service, warehouse, a lot of different elements. So I was always like very, very friendly with everybody. And the one thing that I've found with moving to a big company is the DC and the UK DC, even though it's a 20-minute drive down the road, sometimes you just won't see those people for months and months just because there's no reason for us to go over there. So I'm trying to drum into the team at the minute that even half a day of the week, just drive down, just work there for a half day. If you have that human element and those relationships with other members of the team and other teams, to be honest, you will always, the organisation and the collaboration will be so much better, and everything will just work smoother, like better relationships. And it also means that people want to help you. If you're just a person behind a keyboard, they just don't understand. Like, they might be thinking of crying wolf a little bit, like, oh, it must not be a big issue, whereas in reality it actually is a big issue. And if you can just get on the phone, just drive down, just speak to them, I think it's so important. And the customer team, every single team, like, we kind of speak. That's one of my favorite things about suppliers. We are the grey area of all companies. Like, we have to be in every single, like, marketing, partnerships, customer, every single part of the business needs to know the information that we can give. And I think that's just an amazing thing to be part of. And you are kind of I think you're kind of the glue a little bit. Like, we do get forgotten about a little bit. That's why I love that you're doing a supply chain podcast, because it's making us come to the forefront and make people realize that we are an important element of the business. But we are kind of everything needs the supply, everything needs to be able to get the goods in, and we are kind of through everything. Yeah, but I do think it's going back to the point. I do just think that you just need that human element. You need to be able to just speak to every part of the business and then be comfortable to come to you. And yeah.
No, that's very interesting, and I think you've almost anticipated the question that I wanted to ask, is like how you sustain, because you can institutionalize the process, you can hire some consultants, so you can mandate some ways of working from the top management, but it's actually kind of the practical implementation of how to get this working and then how to sustain the level of productivity. And I think what you've mentioned is actually amazing. It's like literally asking your supply chain colleagues to spend half a day in the warehouse so they can actually get the look and feel of how this works, what it does, what the problems are, so they can have a much better degree of respect for what the other guys are doing. So when they come back with particular questions or concerns, those could be easily addressed. That is very, very interesting. If we come back, not come back, but if we touch upon again on the technology side of things, because we are kind of juggling in the modern world, so it's very hard to retain 100% of information in one's head. We need to rely on technology sometimes. So how do you find that symbiosis of kind of human experience and human knowledge and human compassion and human relations with the help of technology, some data platforms, interfaces with supplier platforms, so different systems. And sometimes people, I mean, at least in my experience, what I saw is some people just get lost in the weeds of so many details. They can't extract information. They see tons of data but not enough information. So how do you find that kind of challenge?
I mean, I quite enjoy looking at all the data and trying to pull everything from it. However, I do understand what you mean. And I mean, our senior team are obviously very, very busy people, and they can't be expected to go through all of this information. So you do need to pull the important parts, the parts that they're actually bothered about, and make it not simple, but quick to read for them. A lot of our information is, like, we do use Excel sheets still quite a lot. However, we've got 2 warehouse management systems which we pull from, and we also use an accounting software as well, which it does all collaborate quite well. However, it's as far as I'm aware, as it was implemented just before I started, it has been an absolute nightmare to implement it. I think we are about there now, but thankfully it's all pulled together, and it does make it easier to pull reports, and rather than having to trudge through endless Excel sheets, which, even though I do actually quite like, it does save a lot of time. I think, to be honest, even though we are trying to pull away from the whole the Excel point of view and using Excel, I do still think there is some need for some Excel just knowledge for anybody coming into supply chain. So even just like little things like VLOOKUP, sum ifs, anything like pivot table, I do think, even though we are giving that information to our senior team, sometimes if you step back and you look at that raw data, that's when you see the issues, or you see the anomalies, and you can cut those anomalies out. Whereas if you just pull these reports, you kind of miss all of that. It's always good to like trudge down and look into the weeds and see the actual issues. But yeah, in general, we do still use a lot of Excel. Um, we are trying to move everything to our WMS systems and our accounting software, but there's still need for it, in my opinion.
Mm. No, I completely understand, and I've worked with Excel, so my background is in management consulting. So Excel was one of those toolkits that
Yeah,
was at the heart of what we were doing, and it's a very very powerful tool. It's very versatile. Um, with the kind of more standardized way of working and industrialized way of working of the corporates that are large, kind of medium to large size, over reliance on Excel may become a detriment. So there is definitely a place for Excel, kind of all the ad hoc things, but sometimes the systems, there needs to be a right balance
yeah,
maintained. I've seen businesses that could be, I don't know, $1 billion businesses that are plugging Excel spreadsheets into SAP, because some of the systems are incapable of having that kind of versatility that Excel provides you. And sometimes over reliance on Excel just very simply, I don't know, if people are forgetting to put a number in the right place or forgetting the comma, especially if there's manual input. It just creates a massive detrimental results. But what I think at the end of kind of our conversation, I think I would like to ask you kind of one question essentially. What sort of advice would you give businesses, especially fast growing business? Because you described Lounge is growing at the moment. You're launching new categories. You're launching new lines of products. So what sort of advice would you give people that are in your shoes, but at the earlier stage where not everything is settled yet? They don't have maybe the luxury of certain systems and certain ways of working that are already proven to be effective in
yeah.
their business. So how would you, what advice would you give them?
I mean, a massive thing is obviously honesty. Make sure you've got clear communication with your forwarders. If you want to sit down and have a conversation with them, just remember that they're the ones with the feet on the ground. They're the ones who can actually see what's coming up. And then be honest with the rest of your team as well. Like, I had to really drum this into the guys and Maisie and Alice in my team is like, before I started, they were always a little bit scared to give some bad news, but just remember that the team aren't frustrated with you; they're frustrated with the situation. So they would much rather know the issues and be able to combat them straight away, rather than you keep it quiet and then tell them the very last minute, and then there's no way we could fix it. So just be proactive and always just always ask questions. None of us know everything. Every day is a learning day. I've learned so much in the past year with Lounge, just been in a bigger company, and it's just so important just to speak to everybody in the business, not just everybody in the business, sorry, everybody in the whole supply chain workspace, because you will always learn everything each day, whether it's from the forwarder, the suppliers, anybody. So just keep learning,
Mm.
keep asking questions, keep the communication clear, and just be honest with everybody in the chain.
And don't be afraid of having some even immediate negative reaction. People get
Yeah,
over this because having a bad news is better than having no news and then
exactly.
only to realize that yeah, a bad stuff happens and there's nothing can be done about it. No, that's very interesting. Thanks very much, Rhys. That was very very interesting conversation, and we definitely touched on super important points. So thanks very much for coming, and I look forward to having a chat with you in the future.
Nice one. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Michael.
Thanks for tuning into Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you have a story or opinions to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to Chain Reaction or visit flocks.is for more information. See you next time.